Hello and welcome to my channel. My name's Jo, this is Joey Sewy, and today we're finishing off my stash busting series with a talk about books. So what I want to share with you in this video is the favourite books that I own that help me work through smaller pieces of my stash. So in the first two videos I talked about my favourite patterns to use up, and I also in the very first video went through actually me clearing out my stash and giving things away. So here we are at books after patterns. I have them all piled up on the shelf behind me. We're in my son's bedroom because he's at school, so he'll never know. Just to mix up the background, I'm wearing a project that I shared in my most recent video, which was my What Did I Sew in August. But I didn't sew this in August. Watch the video for the story. And it's a scrap busting project as well. So I've got a t-shirt which uses quite a small amount of jersey, but the specific sort of stash busting project is this jersey scarf. You can see the fringing there. So I mentioned briefly in my What Have I Been Sewing video how to make this. If you're interested in a little bit more information, then give me a comment down below and I can do a video with some pictures of how I made it. But basically you get a long piece of jersey and you cut strips. It's not really much more complicated than that, but if you'd like to see more, let me know. Let's get into the books. So they are in no particular order. They are only picked from the ones I know, so it is not exhaustive, but these are some great ideas and some books that I like. So from the top, the first one is called The Artful Bird by Abigail Patner Glassenberg. This is one of my favourite books, so we're starting with a goodie. If you watched my last video, I think it was, or the last video in the stash busting series, I had Ferdy the Birdie, who is a fabric bird that I've made, and you all see that he looks a fair bit like this. He's unique because he's his own colour and he's got his own feathers and what have you, but he's similar to this. So I didn't actually make him specifically following these instructions because I went on a course, but these instructions are really close to how he was made. So in the book it is the wren pattern. Essentially it's a wire structure, but this book I really like it because it's got all sorts of different ideas for making different birds. So we've got ones like that, a tiny little fluffy chick, all sorts of things from basic techniques through to projects. That's a little bit about the basic way of making the wire structure, things about surface design. So it's quite niche because it's all about birds. But if you like fabric art, and if you've got basic sewing skills, then you will be able to follow at least some, if not all, of the ideas in here. I really would like to make some crows because I'm a big fan of crows and ravens. So it's got a crow pattern, and also because it uses similar techniques, I like the woodpecker, it also gives you the ability to actually take your own imagination and do whatever you like from it. Flamingo, anybody? So it's got huge amount of potential. The Artful Bird, really good one. I'm starting with one of my absolute favourites. So next is something a little bit different. It's called Mobile Art by Claire Young. There will be links down below to all the books. Now this one uses all sorts of different materials. It uses paper too, which is something I like working with when I'm playing around. But it has ideas for yarn. This is a child's mobile, so there's stuffed toys. I actually really like mobiles for adults as well. They're just really mesmerising. So for example, we have some balsa wood ships, sailing boats, that you could use fabric covered sails. Oh, it's got macrame. And recently I made some macrame out of fabric scraps as well, using jersey strips for macrame. That will have been in my, I think, What Did I Sew in June video, and if not, in my May one. So take a look at that because that is a really great way of using up scraps of fabric, tear it into strips. Let me find another one for fabric. So a lot of these are for other, you could do, it's got folded chevrons, which I think you could do with fabric as well, especially if you put interfacing on it or you starched it. That would be a fabulous idea. Some discs. Again, you might have to stiffen a lot of the fabrics, but I just love mobiles, and I think it's a fantastic way of using up really special pieces of fabric, and you might not have thought about making a mobile before. So mobile art, and they're really good ideas in this book, and also basic information about how to make a mobile. So again, it's a good jumping off point for your own imagination. Next we have this one, The Art of Manipulating Fabrics by Colette Wolfe. Now I've had this book for quite a while, and I think it's just really inspiring. It's not the most polished graphic design book ever, but the ideas, it's just so comprehensive. That's what's wonderful about it. So I'm looking around for things. You could use this, I mean, for example, oops, losing a page. So for example, some ideas there about how to manipulate and ruche fabric. So this could be used to, for example, make a pocket, make something for a yoke for a garment. You could use it in conjunction with the idea of making a bird. You could use it in the conjunction with the idea of making a mobile or anything. It also has great ideas that you could just take into your garment making and use within a garment. So the art of manipulating fabric, the techniques you can use with large pieces of fabric, but also you can use them with your smaller pieces, either just to play and practice or to make objects out of it. So I really like this book. Like I say, it's one that I turn to just to browse and just to kind of get my imagination alight. So again, here's some really curious things you can make by manipulating into balls. So it will take a basic technique such as making yo-yos or ruffles or gathers, but then it will elevate it to another level and say, you know, what if you did this? What if you did 15 in a row? What if you did one side tight and one side loose, and all sorts of things. So great book to inspire you. I'm throwing them onto the bed as we go. Next we have a couple of books about making fabric flowers. These are both a little bit dated, especially this one now because I've had them a little while, but there are some good fundamental ideas. So I've put some post-its in my favourites. So for example, we have a free motion flower. So this book is called Fun to Wear Fabric Flowers, and it is by Elizabeth Helen Searle. And the way that these fabric flowers are made is that the fabric is has an underlining or a thicker fabric underneath, because most of them are silks, but you could do it with a thick fabric on its own, and then the flower is embroidered and then you cut around it afterwards. And I really like that. And of course you could do that, not flowers, you could do anything. You could just do geometric shapes or anything like that. And then the second one I picked out of this was called a frayed flower. So it's basically just gathers with a centre button. But I thought there'd be a picture on the next page. I like just the reminder that you can use frayed fabrics as well, and often when you're using up scraps, actually frayed edges are an advantage rather than a disadvantage, which they are in garment sewing. So that is the frayed flowers, and both of those are from Fun to Wear Fabric Flowers. Yeah, some of the images are a little bit 1990s and not in a good way, but the ideas are still strong. And then this one, which I think is a little bit more modern. A lot of these ideas are for felt in this book. This is called Fabric Blooms and is by Megan Hunt. And a lot of the ideas, so for example, here we've got like a carnation type flower, and they're for felt. Now, a tip you can use, you can have this one for free, is that if you have fabric that is not felt, because it's quite easy to use up wool felt scraps in craft projects anyway, because they don't fray, you can cut them into any shape, you can glue them, they behave in a very stable way, almost like paper a lot of the times. If you want to use a fabric in that way, but it isn't like that, you know, it's a cotton quilting or it's a bit of polyester, you can iron it onto felt interfacing. So this stuff is made for bag making usually, but it is like your standard interfacing, but it is glued on one side. So it's basically like gluing your fabric onto a fleece or a felt backing, and then it will behave like felt. So you can transform the nature of your scraps. If you've got a really brilliant colour or a really brilliant pattern, but it's not the right type of fabric, you can change the type of fabric it is for small projects like this. So I picked out, here we are, a jersey posy pin. I quite like the styling of this photograph because I love stripes. And also the fact that this one, unlike a lot of the others in the book, as I've already said, is actually not using felt, it's using jersey. So as you can see from the picture here of what you need, you just need 3 different sizes of these shapes, and you basically just sew them in a line and then pull that into a loop, and you keep doing it and you pile them on top of each other, and then you sew a brooch pin on the back and ta-da! You could do it multicolored, of course, but I mean, who's not going to have pieces that small left over from a t-shirt project even? So it's a really great way that you could use it up. And a little bit like I've made an accessory the same colour as a garment, you could do that. You could make an accessory the same colour as a garment, and then you've taken a simple garment and made it something a bit more fancy. But you can also take it off, so you can have a simple garment and a fancy garment. And then what else did I pick out from this book? Oh yeah, so a lot of the flowers are brooches, but this one was actually like a bauble or just a hanging decoration. So Christmas might come to mind when you see a hanging bauble, but I have bits and pieces a bit like this hanging in my house all year round. The way that this is made is you start with squares, you cut them into circles, you fold them into pieces, and then you stick a pin through that point there, and then the pin goes into a polystyrene ball, and then you do that a bazillion times. It says you need about 100 6 by 6 inch squares and a foam ball measuring 5 inches. You could do it on a different scale. So it's quite a long process, and it's suggesting that you actually glue, so you pin and glue each time. Just a safety warning, I've used a hot glue gun for years, but a couple of days ago I got my first ever hot glue gun burn, and it really hurts. Really hurts. I had a total brain failure, decided I could press the glue with my finger, and instantly got a blister, like a burn blister on my finger, and I won't show you my injury, but it's still there. Yes, fun. So that's a few flower fabric ideas for you. Moving on, how about Nordic Crafts? And indeed I have So Scandinavian. So we have Nordic Crafts and So Scandinavian. The kind of Scandinavian craft tradition is all about frugalness and using things up a little bit like the American craft tradition, I suppose. But there were some other ideas that you could use for scraps. So the first one that I picked out from So Scandinavian by Kaiser Kinsella. Yeah, probably murdered that name, sorry. Sorry, Ms. Kinsella. Is a braided cotton rug. So essentially, long strips of fabric. They have used pinking shears for the very ends that then become the end of the rug. You then plait them, and you then zigzag sew. They've done it on a sewing machine, but you could equally hand sew that all together, and you have a rug, as if by magic. So that was an idea, and of course you could deliberately buy fabric to do that, but you could also collect fabric of different colours or the same colours, tonally the same, whatever you wanted to do, and then you braid it all together. Another idea is a doorstop. I've got a couple of doorstops around my home based on this kind of idea. And this is a square based pyramid, so you need a square and you need 4 triangles. Just looking if there is, yeah, so as you can see from that, it's got a square bottom, it's got 4 triangles, and it's got some ribbon at the top. When I've done this, in the bottom I get a plastic bag, I have sand or gravel in the plastic bag, just tie a knot in the plastic bag, that's in the bottom of your item, and then you sew the top part, you put that in, and then you put a stuffing in the top to make the rest of the shape, and then you sew closed, hand sew closed to the very top, and sew on your ribbon. You might even be able to get that under the machine at that point, because the doorstop needs to be heavy, so you put a plastic bag of gravel in there. And the final idea from this book that I picked out was some slippers. So actually you could probably make slippers for yourself following this kind of idea. These are suggested for children and they're suggested for felt, but I will refer you again to my suggestion that you can actually interface, fuse and then sew together any form of fabric onto a fleecy type backing. I'll put a link down below to the stuff I'm talking about, and then you can transform it so you could have a cotton outer and a fleecy inner. So you could make some shoes even, and I thought obviously shoes don't actually take a lot of fabric, but you can make yourself some slippers. And then in the Nordic Crafts book, the ideas that I picked out are another mobile. I love a mobile, and it's birds. You can see my taste here totally, can't you? So a mobile of birds, but these ones have got free motion embroidery details on them, so I thought they were just absolutely gorgeous. So you could stiffen those up with interfacing. Again, if your original fabric isn't stiff enough, or starch, you can get spray starch, or you can get starch that you can soak your fabric in. So all of those would work because you don't need to wash a mobile. This book has a template in it, so if you want to buy this Nordic Crafts book, it has a template in it, but of course you could draw one freehand or get one off an image site. Yeah, so I really loved the bird mobile. And the last one from this book was another rug, but the method for this one is crochet. So that is the product shot of the rug, and I actually don't crochet. It's not something I've ever, there's only so many crafts I can do, only so many hours in the day, but if you crochet or if you want to learn, I've had a go, and for simple projects it's fairly understandable, I found. So again, it's the idea, this is using a particular yarn that is actually bits of old t-shirt, but you could use it with any scraps of fabric, and as I said with the rug idea before, you could have any old bits and pieces. That's the old-fashioned idea, isn't it? Totally make, do, amend. Or you could collect pieces that were tonally the same, or even deliberately buy fabric. Not that that's very stash busting, but the idea still translates. So that is Nordic Crafts. When I was looking, I found this is not a book, but this is an idea. If you have recently had a birthday, I've recently had a birthday, and if you received something from someone far away who asked Amazon to gift wrap it, you will probably have received your gift in, whoops, I'm pulling the wrong ribbons and I'll ruin it, in one of their gift bags. So Amazon, certainly in the UK, for the last year or so, have not been wrapping in paper, they've been using fabric. I think the sustainability of that is a bit questionable because the paper will biodegrade, whereas this is very synthetic fabric. But let's step aside from that for a minute. Gave me the idea that why not wrap your presents in fabric? I've heard people say that before, but a bag is a particularly easy way to wrap them. I always save all of these Amazon wrappings, and people get their presents back in these. Not, you know what I mean. I don't mean I'm giving their presents back. So it's a rectangle, and it has a channel at the top. It has some ribbon in. Basically, it's got 2 pieces of ribbon. One of the pieces of ribbon starts and ends at this end, and you pull it that way. And one of the pieces of ribbon starts and ends at this end, and you pull it like that. So when you pull both pieces of ribbon at once, magically your present is wrapped. Imagine how quick Christmas would be if you had a bunch full of bags like that. So yeah, I thought that was a good idea and uses up some pretty good scraps. You could even do it patchwork, couldn't you, if you wanted. Next, so this is an old library book that I bought off from a second-hand shop at some point, and it's mostly just got kids' ideas. Not that there's anything wrong with kids' ideas, but again it had rag rugs, so that's just an extension of the plaited idea. It's just the same. That's one where they've gone tonally different, and they have obviously plaited different colours together. So that's an idea of how you can do that. And of course, if you are looking out for books, thrift stores, charity stores are an absolutely perfect place to look, because for some reason you get a lot of craft books in thrift stores, and so you won't struggle to find things. Some of the pictures might be outdated, but the techniques will be really good. And often older craft books have quite complex techniques because they assumed people would know how to do things. So you can learn some really intricate things from an older book. So we have 4 left before my voice runs out. Decorative Knot Craft is a book I have got. I cannot remember where I got this from. I think it was a gift. And it's basically lots of things you can make by knotting cord, but you can knot fabric. You can make strips of fabric and you can knot it. Depends on what fabric you've got. So yeah, all these ideas. Those are earrings, but you can use, let's find something else. There were some butterflies somewhere. Show me the butterflies. Where are they? There's a butterfly knot. I mean, wouldn't that be fun just to do that? Even if it was for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Put them on necklaces, a square knot. So there's loads of ideas that you could use fabric for if you just translate the techniques of tying the knots into using up fabric. I quite like, a bit of a dated photo, but I quite like that necklace there with a single bead and a lot of square knots. New Ideas Infusing Fabric. This is more of an art book. It's by Margaret Beale, but again it's hugely inspirational with all sorts of ideas. I picked out this one in particular, so I was thinking about jewellery after that knot book, and this one is fused layers of fabric with buttons, and you could put designs on. These have got lines of stitching on here, so you could go as elaborate or as unelaborate as you like. There's also shapes cut there. So as a little aside, you might not know, but you can, if you've got a synthetic fabric like a polyester, you can cut that with a soldering iron. You need to use glass underneath so that you don't burn your surface, but you can actually cut it almost like with a knife, and the way that the fabric would melt, you can cut shapes in it, so you can do some amazing ideas with that. So there's all sorts of things in here. A lot of them are art based, but again, they give you ideas of things to do. So New Ideas Infusing Fabric. So second to last, Mending Matters. This is a really new book, new to me, and one that is fairly new. It's by, what's her name, Katrina Roderberg, and she's quite big on Instagram, and there's a hashtag called Visible Mending, and this book is inspired, is kind of her book version of the idea of visible mending. So there are all sorts of ideas, such as putting fabric behind a hole that you might have in your garment, and so darning jeans, or here you go, so mending jeans by putting denim behind denim and then decoratively stitching. Go to the visible mending hashtag on Instagram if you want to see, because there are so many fantastic ideas on there. So some of these ideas are from sashiko, the Japanese mending tradition, but it makes you want to cut up a real pair of jeans. You can see the principle that they're using of binding the edges, and then the rest of the running stitches are partly to secure the second layer of fabric underneath, but also just purely decorative. So this book is full of ideas on how to patch your clothes and make them better than they were before. So here we go. That's a patch on a dress. So the patch, the idea is the patch wasn't originally there, and then it was dyed and then sewn onto the dress as a, supposedly to kind of fix a hole, but also as an adornment. Of course you have elbow patches. I have a video about elbow patches, which I will link to, because I did some elbow patches a year or so ago for a friend. So Mending Matters by Katrina Rodeberg is a great source for inspiration to reuse clothes for mending, and really a lot of them you could deliberately do to perfectly good garments if that's your style. Last one, I saved my favourite idea for last. Now this was a birthday present, I think it was last year, and it is a swatch book. It is invaluable. One of the things I struggle with most in my sewing life is matching fabric to patterns, and especially shopping online. This book, there is a companion reading book, but this folder is basically descriptions of fabric, and then the killer thing is examples of the fabric. And what I thought was, I'm assuming that to get all these fabric scraps you're sewing, or at the very least buying fabric. So when you know what the fabric is, or even if you don't know what the fabric is, why not build yourself a resource book like this of all sorts of different fabrics? So for example, this one has different types of stretch cotton, or no, stretch fabric. So it's got nylon with elastane, cotton poplin with elastane, cotton elastane with lycra in, silk satin with elastane, silk jersey with elastane, and a silk seersucker with elastane. So you could get yourself a folder, get yourself pages. There are lots of blog articles about different kinds of fabrics. I think Nordic Crafts has quite a lot of resources about different kinds of fabrics. So find yourself an information resource. Either buy a book if you want to, borrow one from the library, or go online. Divide up pages, and as you get a new fabric, a new project, decide what that fabric is and put it into your page and write about what did it feel like to sew with, how did it behave, what's the composition. And then when you're shopping online, especially if you know the composition, then if someone says, okay, well it's nylon with elastane, and you're like, I don't know what that is, or what will that feel like for making a t-shirt, you can go to your swatch resource book and you can feel it, and you can look at it and you can think, that would make a rubbish t-shirt because it wouldn't be very breathable, or that's exactly what I want because I want a real technical look. So build yourself a swatch resource book. This is a great book. If you want to buy a book, I would recommend this. It is really, 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 really good for learning about fabric because you literally get your hands on it. It's not cheap, but there'll be a link down below. But you could also build yourself one for nothing using your own resources. Well, I have talked a lot. I hope that you've enjoyed that. I hope I've sprung some ideas into your imagination, and at the very least I hope I have entertained you for a little while. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already become a subscriber or followed me on Instagram, I'd love it if you would do one or both of those things. I will be back really soon with another video. Until then, stay safe and I'll see you soon. Bye.